Hey friends, welcome to 1 Minute with Monee, a podcast where we help busy adults live life with balance and harmony 1 minute at a time. I'm your host Monee, owner of Time Managed LLC, a full-service concierge and personal assistant business in Atlanta, Georgia. Visit our website, timemanagedllc.com, for more information about our services. Every week, I'll share tips for how you can manage your lifestyle and tackle your to-do list efficiently. Before we get into our discussion, let's listen in to our quick tip for the week. Welcome to another episode of 1 Minute with Monee. Today, I am so happy to have my guest here, Kristin Harper, where we're going to deep dive into mindfulness. Now, if you have been following me and watching out some of the past few episodes, you know that we are working on a series on self-care, and mindfulness is absolutely one of those things that is a part of that self-care toolkit that we all need. Kristin, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Monee?
Doing well, thank you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. So I'm Kristin Harper. I am a wife, a mother, a member of Delta Sigma Theta, a business owner, a former executive within the Fortune 500 space, and just somebody who loves to live life to the fullest and choose joy.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here today. A part of your expertise and the things that have motivated you during your career, one of those is mindfulness. Can you tell me a little bit about how you how did you come to explore mindfulness?
Sure. So I've owned Driven to Succeed and worked in that business full time for the past 5 years. And it is a business that has two divisions. One is market research. So that's everything from focus groups to surveys and everything in between. And then the second is professional development, which is consisted of speaking and training, mostly from my perspective, on leadership and emotional intelligence. And there are others within my team and my network of other business owners who specialize in other topics. One of the things I discovered is that the Black mortality rate among mothers in particular is disproportionately high compared to mothers of other racial backgrounds and ethnicities. And I was particularly struck by that with a young lady, a sorority sister who I didn't know personally, but many of the people who I love know her. And she lost her life, unfortunately, a few weeks after giving birth. Monée Williams almost did the same when she gave birth, and many of the nurses and caretakers ignored her pleas. And thank goodness she was able to get the intervention that she needed and her life was saved. And so that got me to thinking, why do we have such disproportionately high mortality rates when it comes to Black women and mothers? And you can think even beyond that around health equity. Why does health equity exist? Because there are so many disparities that exist. And it got me to thinking, okay, what could be done about this? There are a ton of trainings. There are a ton of continuing education courses. And I actually did some research and found that Harvard Business Review did a meta-analysis of over 400 unconscious bias trainings, and it found that those trainings did not have an impact. And so I thought there has to be a better way, because learned behavior, it happens over time. And, having been in corporate for 20 years, a lot of times training is a compliance exercise. You're just rushing to get through it so you can get on with your day. But training is so important. And so I thought of what could be another way to close this gap. And so I'm a believer. The Spirit of God gave me the idea of micro learnings. So mindfulness came to me because that was the first topic that I leveraged to pilot this idea of micro learnings. And that was around mindfulness related to how can we address, reduce, and manage stress and anxiety. So that's how mindfulness came to be a part of my life.
Okay, that's an amazing story. You find inspiration in all that you do, and your business, your friends. So it's a great story. When you define mindfulness, what do you think of? How can one define mindfulness in simple terms?
Yeah, I think mindfulness is really about being present and being honest. We live in a society and in a country that rewards productivity. And right now, that may be a trigger word for some with all that's going on with the executive branch of the government and so much uncertainty and disruption. But I think that I define mindfulness as being present and being honest. Now, why does honesty matter in it? Because it takes just a moment of slowing down to really get in touch with what we're feeling and why we're feeling it. And so that's how I define mindfulness.
Mm-hmm. Are there any common misconceptions about mindfulness that you know of?
Yeah. I think one of the common misconceptions is that it takes a long time, or that it's for people who are stereotypically into yoga or tree huggers, etc. But mindfulness is something that is human, that we all can benefit from slowing down, being present, being thoughtful about why we feel what we feel, what's underneath that, what are the triggers that are driving it, what are the mindsets, and what are the beliefs that we have. So I think that's one big one, that it takes a long time to do, and it really doesn't. And I think the other belief, and I've alluded to it, is that mindfulness is for a certain type of person, and that's absolutely not true. In fact, I have 3 children, and my youngest, one of his school teacher, I don't know if it was a school teacher or someone in the school, taught him a breathing technique. And he was in elementary school. And so mindfulness is absolutely relevant no matter your age, no matter your stage, no matter your race or ethnicity, no matter your career. It's relevant for every human being.
Yeah, I like that. And in my mindfulness journey, I have learned to not only pause and be still, but really be aware of not only how I'm feeling, but the thoughts that I have during that time of silence or stillness. So there's definitely benefits of being still. But I think the other component of that is really understanding and being aware of how you're thinking, how you're feeling, and what you're going to do once you get out of that moment of mindfulness. What are some techniques that you can think of for or that you can share that can help us manage stress and anxiety when it comes to mindfulness?
Yeah, one of those techniques is really around breathing. That's really the easiest technique that we can use for mindfulness, and it doesn't take long. It could be in as little as 30 seconds. And oxygen has so many great benefits for our mind, for our body. You know, one of the hardest working muscles is our brain. And especially if you're in, a job that requires a lot of problem solving or strategic thinking or analysis, our brains need a break. And so oxygen and breathing is so important. It's almost like, and I heard this a couple years ago and I've never forgotten it. It's like giving your insides a shower. You know how we take a shower on a daily basis to clean our outward, our skin and body, etc. Oxygen and breathing is like a bath for our insides. It just calms everything down, and it helps us to not only refresh, but also to have more energy and be more present and alive.
Now, you mentioned work, and one of the things that I love to do if I have the time and if it's appropriate is to have a walking meeting. So if somebody just wants to, do a quick one-on-one or get some advice or just catch up, instead of sitting at my desk, I try to go for a walk during that time. And so it's true that oxygen does help to kind of replenish you. So even though I might not be truly tapped into mindfulness as far as being alone and still, I think my body is still benefiting from the movement with the mindfulness. Are there any other techniques that you would recommend for productivity and decision making when it comes
Yeah.
to work?
I actually just read this the other day. I think it was Inc. magazine, and it talked about when you wake up in the morning, just looking at the sun, it can rejuvenate you and it can get those endorphins moving really quickly. So that's another technique. One of the techniques I really like is called the grounding exercise. Now, this is a exercise where you utilize all 5 of your senses. So you start with like 5 things that you can see, and then 4 things that you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. That exercise, again, doesn't take very long to do, but what it does is it actually grounds us, and it also has a secondary benefit of distracting us from whatever the emotion might be or whatever may be consuming our mind or our heart at the moment. And so that's a really great exercise as well. It's called the grounding exercise or the 5-4-3-2-1 exercise. And what I love about that exercise is there are things that in the ordinary course of a day, you probably wouldn't see. Like I just looked up at the top of my webcam and I see little flickers of dust. I didn't notice that until I was looking for 5 things that I could see, right? And so that grounding exercise helps us to be present in the moment, and it just helps to recenter so that we can move forward in a powerful way and in an intentional way and not be consumed with whatever may be on our minds or on our hearts.
Right. When it comes to decision making for work, if for instance, we take that grounding exercise as an example, if I have, let's say, a presentation that I have to do, and I use that to ground me before I go into the presentation. But what if I have a decision that I need to make? How do I use some similar exercise to make some great decisions or to really tap into what really should be done in certain aspects of my job?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it happens to all of us. You know, the thing about decisions, there's generally no right or wrong answer. There's only trade-offs. And so a couple techniques to consider. One is repeating the question or repeating the task or the decision to be made. What that does is it helps to drive clarity around what you've heard to make sure that you heard the right thing and that you're going to reply to the right topic or question at hand. Number 2, it buys time. And sometimes we need that. We need to let our brain catch up. And, you know, it's just so fascinating to know how quickly the brain works in like microseconds and milliseconds. And so that's a technique. And pausing. Pausing is a third technique. And saying, you know, that's a really good point. Sometimes we may not have the answer right away, and that's fine. That's human. What I've learned over time is to not try to fake it and to say, if I don't know the answer, to say, that's a really great question. I hadn't thought about that. And you could buy yourself time to say, give me some time to think about that. Or you could bounce it back to the team. I'm curious, what are your thoughts about that? Right? Let's talk about it. It's something that I hadn't considered. And a lot of times, I think the battle, a lot of times is really in our minds. Anxious thoughts can start to fill your mind. Insecurities, uncertainties, feeling less than, feeling defeated, all types of emotions can start to well up. And one of the techniques that I share during my mindfulness online course is really about taking time because the brain needs a little bit of time to catch up. So I call this like emotional agility, using information to guide you instead of letting your emotions control you. It takes the body about 90 seconds to let a feeling come and go. And so if we respond right away, a lot of times what happens is we respond based on our impulses and based on our emotions and not letting our brains and our logic and rationalization catch up to our emotions. So time is a great asset and a great skill set to have in taking that pause and repeating what needs to be said and buying some time either in the moment or afterwards so that you can reflect and then come back powerfully with the answers or at least a perspective around what that is. But we have to push aside those automatic thoughts. You know, most of what we think about on a daily basis is automatic.
Okay.
And the vast majority of those automatic thoughts are negative. So knowing that's just how we're wired as humans, the battle really is for the mind. So you have to think about, what are you feeding your mind and taking those thoughts captive and sometimes exploring, why am I thinking this? Why am I feeling this? And discard what is not useful and replace it with affirming thoughts so that you can move thoughtfully and powerfully through your day.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And it sounds like there may be obstacles as people try to become more mindful. So this is new to someone, or they're trying it in a different space. So maybe they only try it at home or in the morning. But if they're trying it in the workspace, it may be new. So there sounds like there may be some obstacles to actually leaning into being more mindful. Are there any other obstacles that you can think of and ways that people can adjust if this is new to them?
Yeah. There are a lot of different types of obstacles. One of the things that I remember about one of the trainings that I did, this was at a health system, and it was a day-long training for high potential leaders within the organization. And I had the team do an exercise where they got feedback in different areas of their life, feedback from a work perspective, and then feedback from a home, community, outside of work perspective. And one of the employees shared something really interesting. She shared that she shows up differently outside of work than she does at work. And her voice is much more pronounced outside of work than it is inside of work. And so some of the barriers can include context. Some of the barriers can include the who and what does your circle, what does your community, what does your support look like in different contexts. It can also include some of preconceived notions that we may have, the relationships and the strength or lack thereof of the relationships that might exist. Our aspirations can have an impact and our motivations can have an impact and sometimes a barrier to being mindful. One of the most powerful tools I've recently discovered is an award-winning app called How We Feel. With How We Feel, there are 4 quadrants of high energy, low energy, positive, negative. And I may be getting that wrong, but with the names, but there are 4 quadrants. And I love this app because it provides great insights. For me, I have programmed it such that it will remind me 2 times a day at 10 a.m. and at 6 p.m. a trigger. How do you feel? You just pop it in. And you could also use a journal as well. So I use it to capture a sentence or two about why I'm feeling what I'm feeling. And by the way, there are no wrong emotions. And again, it's not negative and positive. I'm actually going to find it because I don't want to misconstrue because I don't know that there are necessarily negatives and positives. Okay. High energy, low energy, and pleasant and unpleasant. Okay. So that's how they characterize it. And it's color coded. So I use this app, and what I like about it is I can see trends. I can see trends on how I'm feeling in the time of day. I can see trends based on the day of the week. You can even code it where it's like, what are you doing? Are you at work? Are you at home? Are you with family? Are you doing board work? Are you doing community work, etc.? So I've leveraged it to give me data. And one of the things that I discovered about 2 months ago is that mornings, I tend to be, I could wake, it could be pleasant, it could be unpleasant. It's just all over the board. Evening, especially before bedtime, I tend to be pretty consistent and low energy pleasant. But different types of situations, I feel differently, right? And so you can use that app. I've used that app to uncover emotions, and that has led me to understand what are some of the barriers, what are some of the things that I need to work through when it comes to being mindful, being present, and understanding how I'm feeling, why I'm feeling, and what I want to do about it.
That sounds like
Those are a few of the barriers and challenges
yeah.
that exist when it comes to mindfulness. And what I love about this, it doesn't take long at all.
Right, absolutely.
20 seconds.
So you have the reminder. So you are definitely a busy person. So you have that reminder 2 times a day to kind of check in with yourself, and then you've programmed it to kind of give you information about how you might be able to move differently, or at least be aware. Be intentional about, okay, I'm feeling this way on this day because of X, Y, Z. So now you know how to manage some of those feelings and perhaps even the situation if you're not, since you're now aware, you now to have that data.
I agree. And the thing about emotions, I don't think we can control emotions. Emotions just like well up. But again, that insight that it takes about 90 seconds for a negative emotion or unpleasant emotion to kind of filter its way through our body. Letting that time transpire is really important because emotions will just creep up and it's fine. I like to say that emotions are really data. It's data to investigate, like what's the why behind why we're feeling what we're feeling. And sometimes it takes courage to spend a little bit of time to do that work, but we turn out better in the end. So I love the term that you use around managing emotions because I don't believe that we can necessarily control them.
Well, tell me a little bit more about your course, your micro-learning that you have around mindfulness.
Yeah. So it's a course that has 4 modules. Each module is 2 to 3 minutes long. It contains a specific topic around mindfulness with the goal of helping to manage stress and anxiety. And it introduces a tool and then gives the learners a technique and encourages them to leverage and try out this tool and add it to your repertoire of tools so that you can navigate life. One thing that has been so wonderful about it is that it's reduced the feelings of stress and anxiety in about 80% of the people who participated in the course. And that's with 4 3-minute modules. So you're talking less than 15 minutes in total. So I'm really excited about the impact that this has made, how people can weave it into their day. You can take all 4 at the same time. You can pace it out if you want to, but I'm really trying to help people to live life more fully, abundantly, and using emotional intelligence and mindfulness and other techniques to be able to do so. So I'm looking to be able to expand these micro-learning courses into a lot more topics so that we can.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things I always think of is how can I make something a no-brainer, something that's automatic. So I believe that having these tools, such as the course that you have, and then also things that we may learn from other apps or professionals in this space, is that we're putting all these things in our toolkit. So then when we're encountered with an emotion or a situation, we'll know how to react and tap into our mindfulness toolkits so that it's really automatic and we don't have to really get bogged down in some of the stress that comes with life. Because of course, stress is there, stress is normal. But the mindfulness techniques and the toolkit that we have will help to get through some of those tough times.
Absolutely. One thing that's interesting about stress is I wrote a book 5 years ago now called The Heart of a Leader, 52 Emotional Intelligence Insights to Advance Your Career. And in the process of writing the book, I did extensive amounts of research. It has a pretty extensive bibliography in it as a result. And one of the things that I learned is that there's a difference between pressure and stress. We all experience pressure, but what turns pressure into stress is when we ruminate, when we can't let go of what it is that is causing pressure in our lives, in our work, in our families, in our being. And there's 2 ways that people tend to deal with unpleasant emotions. Either bottling the emotions, which is basically kind of pushing them down, ignoring them so you can get on with your day, get on with your life or work, not be perceived as weak. And then the other is brooding. And that's where the rumination comes in. It's going over the situation over and over, not letting it go, replaying it in our heads, almost torturing ourselves with living it over and over again. And neither one of those are really healthy for us. So mindfulness can be a wonderful technique to really understand what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, and then what do you want to choose to do about it? And taking no action is just as much of a valid choice as making a choice to take action. Those are a couple things that I wanted to bring up as it relates to mindfulness and really the distinction between pressure and stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I am one of the people who are the bottling. Is that the one where the mind continues to ruminate? I mean, not
Brooding.
ruminate per se. I'm sorry,
Brooding.
brooding. Yes. Okay. So brooding. I feel like that describes a little bit of how I operate sometimes. And I feel like I sometimes have so much on my mind, like I'm all over the place. And it's most of the time when I'm just sitting still, when I have the time to say, okay, why am I sitting here? I should be doing X, Y, Z, or I wonder if so-and-so read my email, or all these things, these ideas and thoughts are in my head, not necessarily trying to predict what's going to happen or even stressing over the past, but it's really just I have so much going on that my mind is just constantly racing, it's constantly busy, constantly thinking. So I look forward to tapping into some of these techniques to help with some of that calming my mind a little bit.
Absolutely. And journaling or just note taking is another great technique. I love the use of technology, and I use notes on my phone all the time just to get things out of my head, because when it's out of our heads, then that reduces the pressure too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I do love a good to-do list.
Yeah, I know you do. And to your point, automation. Automation is another tool that can just reduce and release the pressure of one more thing to think about.
Absolutely. Are there any other books or practitioners that you would recommend, or other courses that you have found helpful in your own journey?
Yeah, I am a huge fan of Brene Brown. She focuses on vulnerability and bravery and courage. And I'm also a fan of Dr. Susan David. She wrote a book called Emotional Agility, and that's a book that I really, really like. She has a newsletter that I enjoy reading. It's short and sweet, and it always gives good insight as it relates to emotional intelligence and how to navigate some of the challenges that we face when it comes to our minds and to our emotions. So those are a couple people who really come to mind. And then that app, How We Feel.
Nice. And then tell us how we can find you and how we can take part in your course.
Sure. So KristinHarper.com is the website, and it'll be in the show notes. But that's Kristin Harper.com. The mindfulness course can be found on Thinkific. So the business name is Driven to Succeed LLC.thinkific.com. And that's where you can find the Mindfulness Moments course, quick tips to manage stress and anxiety. And for all of your listeners, I'll be providing a coupon so that you can access that mindful moments at no cost.
Awesome. I love it. And I'm sure our listeners will love it too.
Absolutely. And then, of course, I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook under Driven to Succeed, the company name.
Okay, great. So hopefully you find some great connections through Kristin Harper and her businesses, as well as through the mindfulness course that she has. So thank you so much for being here. This was a great conversation. I learned a lot, and I'm sure that our listeners did as well.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for the invite, Monee.
Of course, anytime. Thank you for joining me this week. Let's continue the conversation on social media at 1 Minute with Monee on all channels. Also, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. Until next time, be well and